It's time for the school auction art project. So I'm working with my daughter's fourth grade class to do an art project. The idea I had for this year was to cut out the state of Oregon and to cut out the state in the counties so that I would have each county as an individual piece of wood. Then I could have the kids paint onto those individual counties. And I would put all the counties together into a complete map of the state of Oregon. So I'm working on the frame at this point, which I will make out of walnut. So I got some 1/2 inch walnut, and I can make a wide frame with those pieces. Now, it was already planed and pretty much flat, and I didn't really have enough thickness to do any joining or any further planing. So I just used them as the 1/2 inch pieces that I got. I set up the radial arm saw to cut the miters, and I actually did a lot of testing on a scrap piece of wood to get the miter as close to a 90-degree cut as I could. And I got it pretty close. Not perfect, but really, really close. And once I had the pieces rough cut, I could put the top and bottom and the two sides together and cut them together so they'd be the same length. So I would end up with a rectangle and not a rhombus. Then I can put them together and see how close they are. Now I wanted to glue the frame and the counties down to a backing piece. So I got a thin piece of birch plywood that I can mount everything to. And I put the frame together, and my miters weren't quite coming together. So what I can do at this point is sand off a little bit of that cut on the disc sander. And I can push just a little bit more on the pointy end and get the miters to go together perfectly. This doesn't really take off very much length, and I don't really care that much about the overall size. Now I want to glue the miters together, but not glue it down to the backing piece just yet. So I put some wax paper between the frame and the backing piece of plywood. Then I can just glue the miters together. Now, I didn't think the miters needed to be all that strong because in the end I was going to glue everything down to the backing piece. But when I got it all together and I put it on the CNC table to cut out the shape of the state, one of the corners came apart. So I went back and I used biscuits on the miters and re-glued everything. And that seemed to work. Then I could cut out the shape of the state. So really this project is just a glorified sign, which I've really vowed never to do on the CNC machine, but here we are. Now I didn't bother to care so much about the inside of this, so my pieces were different widths, but when I cut out the state, I ended up with this nice frame in the shape of the state, and I wish I had made the rectangle on the inside even. Then I could have used this scrap piece as a frame for a mirror or something like that. Now it's just a scrap piece. But the frame that I was working on came out just fine. Now I can start working on the counties. We went around and around and discussed and talked and thought about what we should have the kids do to the counties. And at this point, we were thinking we would cut the counties out of poplar and then paint the counties a solid color with paint so that you really wouldn't see the wood, and have the kids paint over that solid color. And we thought about picking something from each county for the kids to paint on each county. We thought about doing an overall image, and each student paints whatever the abstract shape is that falls on that county from the overall image. And then when we put it all together, it sort of makes a whole. What we ended up doing was to have each student paint a tree or a series of trees on their county. And when I saw the poplar, I like the wood next to the wood frame, and I was really not liking the idea of painting over the wood. So we dumped the poplar idea, and I went and got some half-inch cherry. And the idea at that point was to let the wood show through and have the kids paint with a stain. And they would paint their trees with stain, and I'd put a finish over that, and you would see the wood that makes up the counties instead of the counties being just paint. Now, some of the counties are rather big, so I had to glue up some of the pieces of cherry into wider sections so I could get those bigger counties cut out. Then for the smaller ones, I could just use the width of cherry that I had. I think I used 3 of these longer sections, then my 1 section of wider glue-ups. So this was just a lot of cutting. Because of the width of the bit on the router, I can't just cut out all the counties next to each other. They need to all be cut out separately so that they'll then fit together without as much of a gap between them. So it ends up taking a little more planning and a lot more wood. And these are the bigger counties being cut out. So the southeastern corner of the state is much more rural, and the counties are much bigger. Then the northwestern corner of the state is more urban, and the counties are a lot smaller. Now, I started cleaning up the pieces, and then I had my wife and Claire come out and do some of the cleaning up of the counties. They had fun doing that. And then Claire really wanted to put the puzzle together, which was fun. Doing this project makes me want to do a road trip around Oregon now, as I've worked with all of the different county shapes.
Or have them kind of start like maybe inch-tall trees kind of thing, or...
And more discussions of what we should have the kids do.
Some a couple inches and then some little ones around, or...
So then we went in one day after lunch, and we had the kids paint. And we thought what we'd do is sort of a Bob Ross style dabbing method with sponges to make the trees. And we got lots and lots of different kinds of trees. And the kids really enjoyed it, and they really had a lot of fun doing it. Now the theme for the auction this year is wood and trees, so this kind of fits with that theme. And we got lots and lots of different trees. And they can go together into the frame. We can see how it all looks together. Now the next thing to do is to start to glue everything down to the backer board. So I glued the frame down first. Then I can cut the sides so everything is flush. Then I can glue the counties in place. And this was a little tricky because I'd left a reveal between each of the counties and the edge. And I wanted that to be somewhat even. So it took some fiddling to get everything to sit in the right spot. We had talked at one time about putting magnets on the back and leaving it as a puzzle, but we decided that was going to get too complicated. Because I sandwiched the wood on top of a piece of plywood, I had the edge of that sandwich that I wanted to cover up. So I made a thin, simple frame, sort of like edge banding around the piece. So I cut strips and mitered the corners, and glued and pin nailed those to the edges of the frame. And then I put finish on everything, and that makes it pop. and it came out really nice. Thanks for watching.